Hello everyone, this is CJ with Cycletron. Today I'd like to talk about Harley Davidson's customer problem. They have two main problems the way I see it. One, not as many people are buying motorcycles these days as there were just a few years ago. And two, some of the people who had once considered buying a Harley wouldn't buy one today for a variety of reasons. So before I get into all that, I'd appreciate it if you would please like and subscribe. For this video, I'm breaking down the issues the way I see it. If you have your own ideas, please let me know in the comment section down below. The Harley Davidson brand is one of the most iconic consumer brands on the planet. After 117 years of existence continuously, they've earned that right for a variety of things that they've done and a variety of bikes that have really inspired Americans throughout the generations. But this iconic status clearly generates both strong negative and positive feelings within its customer base and with people who aren't customers. Right now, Harley Davidson's been struggling to stabilize its motorcycle sales, which have been declining year to year, and they've struggled financially in terms of losing money here recently. As part of this effort, they've initiated what's called the rewire strategy, which basically means they've abandoned their growth strategy that they had most recently under their previous CEO. They were trying to get into more international markets, appeal to younger riders, sell smaller, lower displacement motorcycles. Now they've gone completely the other way, and they've stated they're cutting back on the number of motorcycles they're selling. They've consolidated their dealerships from 700 down to 600 here in the United States, and they are focusing on their, quote, core customer. So to me, this raises the question, what exactly is their core customer? I came across a recent Forbes magazine article online. It was discussing how Harley Davidson views its customer segmentation, basically how it views its different customer groups. I've posted a link to this article in the comments section. Now, this article doesn't really get into how Harley actually focuses on these different groups. It just talks about how they see these different groups. So I thought I'd go through these descriptions and see how much we think that these terms apply today. Again, this is Harley Davidson's terminology. They developed this segmentation, as it were, about 40 years ago. Honestly, some of the terms are kind of goofy, but we can get the general idea of the groups that they're describing. Their largest single group, and there's 7 of them, is what they call the sensitive pragmatist. This group is typically made up of serious riders with a blue-collar background, and that's supposedly made up 25% of their sales. And supposedly these are mostly FL riders. The second group is the laid-back campers, people who like to get out of the big city and experience the great outdoors on a motorcycle, usually weekend riders. Supposedly this is 24% market share of Harleys, and this group prefers the Sporster model bike. The third group is the cool-headed loners, typically white-collar types that like to individualize their bikes through customization and accessories. This group had a 17% market share. The next is the adventure-loving traditionalists, people who have an independent spirit and are prone to taking risks. They tend not to like the trendy type of Harley owner, and this group had a 10% share. The next group is the classy capitalists, people who are also called rich urban bikers, and that's usually not a compliment for whatever reason. These people are self-made groups, usually 45 to 50-year-old age bracket, people who worked hard over their lives and promised themselves once they had enough money they'd get a Harley and enjoy the open road when they got older. This group has apparently an 8% market share. And then you get into what they call the cocky misfits. Again, these aren't my descriptions, but essentially these are the wild group, the people that embrace the wild or bad boy image, and they had a 7% share. Really, Harley Davidson co-opted the authenticity that this group had with the club riders and how they customized post-war era Harley Davidson motorcycles and took to the open road and developed their own culture. And it's no secret Harley Davidson appropriated that image to sell their motorcycles, particularly in the 80s and 90s. Then the last group is this style-seeking group, basically hipsters, for lack of a better term, that had a 5% market share. So again, these categories were developed about 40 years ago. But if you've been around motorcycling, and particularly with Harley Davidson motorcycling, you know that there's these groups, that one group will talk about one or more of the other groups. So I'd like to just kind of simplify this a little bit. I think there's too many of these 7 groups. We can combine them, and of course, one group at different times can kind of spill into a different group. But let's kind of narrow it down a little bit. And my view really reflects some of the comments I've received on some of my videos as well. But the main thing to remember is that people in these groups are very individualistic and independent from each other by and large. So to me, you have the traditionalists, who are probably riding older Harleys right now, and they weren't too happy with the change to the Milwaukee 8 engine in terms of it being smoother and quieter exhaust, among other things, compared to, say, an Evo or twin cam engine. And of course, those changes were made to comply with European air emission and noise standards. Then you have the younger group, who are more trend-setting and open, I think, more open to non-traditional Harley-Davidson motorcycles like the Livewire or the Pan America that's coming out next year in a few months. Then you have just about everyone else who's looking for either a traditional, authentic American cruiser or touring bike. In this group, you have people from the full range of social and economic backgrounds. Clearly, Harley-Davidson has its work cut out for them on several fronts. If you take the traditionalists, this group tends to be older anyway and soon will be aging out of the motorcycle market. I mean, besides, what's Harley going to do? Go back to making Evo engines? I don't think it's going to happen. If you look at the young trendsetters, they tend to have less disposable income than the older group of riders. So when Harley-Davidson had a potential hit with this younger group in the Livewire, they killed it off by bringing it out with an MSRP of $30,000. Harley also killed the Bronx Street Fighter, which could definitely have appealed to this group. So if we buy into the percentages for the remaining group of blue-collar and white-collar riders wanting an American cruiser or touring bike, that leaves you with over half of Harley's target market as a viable customer, in my view. This must be what they mean by their core customer. So what are Harley-Davidson's biggest obstacles to selling new motorcycles to this remaining core of customers? Based on comments I have received and just things I've heard, some people feel that Harley-Davidson has abandoned its blue-collar customer. You often hear that Harley needs to drastically lower prices to enable selling more bikes to this crowd. Is this really true? To test this idea, I looked at the MSRP for a Road King in 1995. Turns out it was $14,000. If you adjust for inflation, in 2020 dollars, this bike would have sold for over $24,000. Today, Harley-Davidson sells the Road King for a starting MSRP of $20,000. So it's actually considerably cheaper than it was selling for 25 years ago in terms of real dollars. Also, why is there so much trash talk between groups of Harley owners? I've seen it in the comments section where someone saying they're from a blue-collar background resents someone from a white-collar background being able to buy a brand new motorcycle for some reason. Or someone in one Harley group referring to someone in another group as pirates. To me, not only does this illustrate the passion around the brand, but also makes some people inclined to want to differentiate their group by making disparaging remarks about another. This takes the whole Ford Chevy thing to a whole nother level. I think it boils down to each group having their own, yet different, authentic reasons for buying a Harley-Davidson motorcycle. And each seem to think that their reason for owning a Harley is the only valid reason. So how do you essentially sell the same type of product to such a diverse group of people? People who in many cases consider themselves to be the polar opposites of each other. Well, the answer is marketing, marketing, and more marketing. Each group of bikers within the Harley-Davidson subculture has to feel like Harley-Davidson truly understands their needs and is only interested in producing motorcycles for them. I have noticed that in business, customers only want their own needs met, and they don't care about the needs of your other customers. In fact, they don't even want to hear about your other customers. Unfortunately, Harley-Davidson management has seen fit to pretty much eliminate their marketing efforts for the time being, except for what they're paying Aquaman to do. This reminds me of what Harley-Davidson did when they killed off the Dyna and rolled it into the Softail line back in 2017. They gave away bikes to a bunch of celebrities, including Aquaman, and social media influencers. I don't think that marketing strategy worked too well. So in a nutshell, I think Harley Davidson is going to ignore any criticism that their bikes are too expensive, and if anything, raise prices even more. They have said as much as their goal behind cutting new production in 2020 and likely into 2021. I did an earlier video about what I think is likely Harley implementing a harvest strategy. In other words, get while the getting's good. Also, I think that the criticism that their bikes are too expensive is not very accurate because they've always been expensive, at least going back 25 years at the start of their big sales boom in the 90s and early 2000s. What about the market segment of budget-conscious riders starting on smaller displacement bikes? Harley's not focusing on them. They've eliminated the 500 to 750 street models. They've eliminated the Sporster in Europe and may soon be eliminating the Sportster here in the United States. That would mean that their cheapest bike would be a Softail at $14,000. What about the traditionalists who wish Harley simply made an older mechanical style bike, more rumbly and noisy than the M8 engine to match the retro styling? You know, just sell it in the United States. Don't worry about trying to keep the European politicians happy. This is clearly not going to happen. So again, to me, this leaves the higher priced cruisers and touring bikes, even a Pan America touring bike, to sell to both blue collar and white collar workers, men and women who are mostly in the age range of, say, 30 to 55 years old. And speaking of the Pan America, this bike will illustrate the challenges of selling motorcycles to the highly entrenched and varied market segments of the Harley Davidson customer base. To me, I think the Pan America will likely be an awesome bike, but one that will not appeal to many of Harley's existing market segments. It won't appeal to the traditionalists because of the looks and the fact that it's liquid cooled. It may not appeal to some hardcore adventure touring people, but that isn't part of Harley's existing customer base anyway. So again, I think that bike should appeal to a rider looking for a great touring bike that has the ability to do some occasional off-roading, or just having the idea that it could go off the road could be enough. I think whether the Pan America is a sales success will be a good indicator of how well Harley can cater to at least half of its customer base in the future and overcome the challenges associated with its market segmentation. Also, as Harley distances itself from some of its past customer segments, will the remaining people in these segments become less antagonistic towards each other? So again, what do you see as the different categories of Harley Davidson customers? Which group or groups should Harley focus on, and how do they go about appealing to that group or groups without alienating people in the other group? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. And again, please like and subscribe. Thanks a lot.